quiet streets where children played ball and adults borrowed a cup of sugar from one another, people believed they knew exactly who lived next door. The man who always waved, the woman who brought over baked goods, the neighbor who once helped fix a lock. But what would happen if the house just beyond your wall concealed a world no one should enter? Many communities, especially those in neglected neighborhoods, had lived alongside such secrets. The police did not knock. The media paid no attention. And the first signs, a sharp tang in the air, an unusual sound after midnight, were dismissed as unimportant. Until one day, a door opened, and everyone understood that the greatest danger was not the stranger on the street, but the neighbor you greeted every morning. And if you want to continue going deeper into the stories behind closed doors, subscribe to the channel. In West Hollywood, California, in 2001, small apartments were arranged tightly into a closed square, narrow hallways, dim yellow lights. Each night filled with the sounds of televisions and the mingling scent of food. Michael Gargiulo lived upstairs. In his 20s, tall, thin, neatly cut hair. Not loud, not showy. He would often nod in greeting, sometimes help neighbors fix a lock, change a light bulb, or carry a bag of groceries. The first victim in California, Ashley Ellerin, 22, lived only a few steps from him. She worked part-time as a model, studied fashion design. On the evening of February 21st, 2001, Ashley had plans to go to a concert. Around 8:30 p.m., a friend called. She answered, saying she would be ready soon. The call ended, the apartment fell silent again. That night, Michael Gargiulo appeared. The door was ajar. No one saw. The next morning, Ashley's boyfriend found her in the living room. There were no signs of theft, but what remained indicated this was not a sudden death, but the result of a deliberate approach, carried out at very close range. Investigators learned Gargiulo lived next door. When questioned, he was calm, saying he had been home alone the previous night. With no direct evidence, the case went quiet. In 2005, Gargiulo moved to El Monte, east of Los Angeles. He continued the same pattern, approaching young women, often neighbors, looking for opportunities when they were alone. Maria Bruno, 32, had just moved into a new apartment, only a few units away from his. On the night of December 1st, she locked her door and drew her curtains. In the middle of the night, Gargiulo entered. There was no loud noise, no forced damage to property. When he left behind a shoe print near the window, an uncommon size, from a limited production. But police at the time had not yet connected it to the 2001 case. In 2008, he moved to Santa Monica. Michelle Murphy, 26, lived alone in a ground-floor apartment. Early on April 28th, she awoke with the sense that someone was in the room. Light from the window fell across the face of a man. In the chaotic moment, Michelle fought back hard. Blood was left on the bed, on the floor. He fled, leaving behind a trace of DNA. This was Gargiulo's first mistake. When the DNA recovered was compared to the database, police found a match with the sample from the Maria Bruno crime scene. This time, investigators reopened the old file, linking it further to the Ashley Ellerin case in West Hollywood. All three victims had lived near him, had been attacked in their private spaces, with no signs of forced entry, meaning the perpetrator had either entered beforehand or been willingly let inside. On June 6, 2008, police arrested Michael Gargiulo at his home. During the investigation, they uncovered another case in Illinois. Trisha Pacaccio, 18, killed in 1993 right outside her home. At the time, Gargiulo lived nearby and often visited. That case had also never been solved. In interrogation, Gargiulo denied guilt, repeating only that he had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But physical evidence, DNA, and Michelle Murphy's testimony were enough to bring him to trial. Prosecutors described him as the boy next door killer, the murderer who lived right beside you, the person you would still trust to help when needed. The trial lasted for months. Witnesses included neighbors, friends of the victims, and forensic specialists. Crime scene photographs were shown, a chair pushed out of place, a teacup still warm, a lock that had not been forced. All suggested the attacks occurred just minutes after the victims had entered their homes, or as they were preparing to leave. In August 2019, the jury found Gargiulo guilty in 2 murders and 1 attempted murder. He was sentenced to death. However, due to lengthy legal procedures, Gargiulo remains in custody at a high-security prison in California, awaiting execution. The apartments where the victims once lived have changed owners, but former neighbors still recall the burnt odor from electrical wires or the feeling of someone standing in the hallway longer than necessary. Some said they had seen him standing in the dark, looking toward the opposite apartment, holding a small flashlight wrapped in tape, as if searching for something. Looking back, people asked themselves why no one noticed. Was it because he was too ordinary? Or because they did not want to believe that evil could live right against their wall, greet them each morning, and disappear behind a closed door? Those who lived in the same block at the time said that burnt smell vanished as soon as police removed Gargiulo's belongings. But it never truly faded. With just a moment of silence, they could sense it again in memory, like a sign that something had happened or was about to happen. Across the Atlantic, nearly 10 hours by air from California, another smell, dense and damp, had once clung to the brick walls of a prison in England. Not from burning wires, not from forgotten refuse, from a glass cell where a man had lived for decades, only a few steps away from others. Within the British prison system, there is only one cell made entirely of reinforced glass, 4 transparent walls like a display case. Inside, Robert Maudsley has lived alone for more than 4 decades. No direct contact, no one allowed inside, only a voice through speakers and eyes meeting through thick glass. Maudsley was born in 1953 in Liverpool. His childhood was marked by abandonment, followed by adoption into a violent foster family. At 16, he left home, wandering in London, surviving through small jobs and occasionally selling sex for money. During this time, Maudsley began experiencing periods of depression and was frequently admitted to psychiatric hospitals. In 1974, at the age of 21, Maudsley was arrested after killing John Farrell, a regular client. According to his statement, Farrell had boasted about harming children, and Maudsley reacted immediately. The court ruled him mentally ill and sent him to Broadmoor Hospital, which holds dangerous psychiatric inmates. Only a year later, Maudsley, together with another prisoner, held and killed an inmate named David Francis. The victim had also been accused of crimes against children. The two locked themselves in with Francis for several hours, and when officers opened the door, it was too late. After this, Maudsley was transferred to Wakefield Prison, the highest security facility in England. There, in 1978, Maudsley killed two more inmates on the same day. In the morning, he lured Solney Darwood, a prisoner convicted of attacking children, into his cell and killed him. In the afternoon, he attacked Bill Roberts, another disliked inmate in the wing. Officers found Maudsley sitting calmly on his bed beside Roberts's body. Following this, prison authorities decided he was too dangerous to be housed with others. They built a special cell, 5.5 meters long, 4.5 meters wide, with a steel door, reinforced glass walls, and 24-hour surveillance cameras. All furniture was bolted to the floor, and food was passed through a small slot. From then on, Maudsley became the only prisoner in Britain kept in complete solitary confinement under such conditions. Those who had worked at Wakefield recalled that the glass cell always carried a damp, dense smell, like moisture trapped for years. The air was not exactly unpleasant, but enough to suggest the place did not belong to an ordinary person. In rare interviews, Maudsley spoke little, in a low voice, sometimes smiling. He did not deny what he had done, but did not attempt to justify it either. When asked why, he simply said, "They deserved it." And no one knows if he would have killed again, as since being placed in the glass cell, Maudsley has never had close contact with another inmate. Outside, the media gave him the nickname the real-life Hannibal Lecter, although Maudsley never engaged in cannibalism. But the fact that he killed 4 people, 3 of them in prison, and his unique method of confinement has made his story part of the darker lore of the British prison system. Years passed, and the glass cell remained unchanged. Each morning, an officer opened the small hatch to pass in food, and in those brief seconds, the damp air inside escaped. Some new guards said the smell reminded them of sealed rooms where time seemed to have stopped. Today, in his 70s, Maudsley still lives in that cell. He reads books, writes letters, and occasionally listens to the radio. No one knows what he thinks when he looks through the 4 glass walls. But at Wakefield there is a story that if you stand outside the cell at night, you will see him sitting on his bed, his eyes fixed on you until you walk away. Those who worked there said the most unsettling thing was not the past crimes, but the absolute stillness, as if he had learned to make himself part of the cell, waiting. In Liverpool, the street where he had spent his childhood had changed, but older residents still remembered the thin, unkempt-haired boy who often sat alone in the corner of the park. They could not connect that image with the man now in the glass cell. But perhaps it was exactly that separation between the person they once knew and the one being held that made the story so haunting. The damp smell inside the Wakefield glass cell could not escape, but it lingered in the memory of those who had stood near it. It reminded them of other places thousands of miles away, where smell was also a warning, one that no one wanted to hear. In a quiet neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, a foul odor began to spread from a two-story house. At first, neighbors thought it was due to a broken pipe or uncollected trash. But the smell did not fade. It only grew stronger, seeping into the gaps between bricks, into half-closed doors. On the corner of Imperial Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio, stood a two-story house painted off-white. From the outside, it looked no different from hundreds of other houses in the area. Grass grew tall in the front yard. The windows stayed shut. Occasionally, the owner, a tall, thin man with dark skin and close-cropped hair, was seen on the porch, smoking, quietly watching the street. Anthony Sowell was born in 1959 and grew up in Cleveland. His childhood was marked by cramped rooms, domestic violence, and neighbors keeping their distance. In 1978, Sowell joined the U.S. Marine Corps, serving several years in North Carolina before returning to the city. But once back, he had no steady job and lived reclusively in the family home he had inherited. In 1990, Sowell was convicted of sexual assault and served 15 years in prison. After his release in 2005, he returned to the house on Imperial Avenue. His criminal record made some people wary, but he maintained the image of a quiet neighbor, occasionally helping with small tasks. From 2007, neighbors began to complain about a strange odor around his house. A stench, strong and suffocating. Some believed it came from a nearby slaughterhouse. Others thought it was from an animal carcass beneath the basement. Garbage collectors noticed it too, but no one looked further. During that time, many women in Cleveland disappeared. Most were black, living in difficult circumstances, in neglected neighborhoods where police were often slow to respond. Some had been to Sowell's house, but none returned. On October 29, 2009, police arrived at Sowell's home to execute an arrest warrant related to an assault case. Upon entry, they noted the distinct stench. The first floor was cluttered with piles of clothing and trash. On the second floor, a locked room. When the door was opened, they found two decomposing bodies. The search expanded to the backyard, the basement, and the roof space. Black plastic bags were pulled out, each containing human remains. Some were buried in shallow soil, others hidden in dark corners of the attic. In total, police recovered the bodies of 11 women. All had gone missing between 2007 and 2009. Longtime neighbors said that, at times, they had heard women screaming from inside the house, but only for a few seconds before it stopped. They assumed it was a personal dispute and did not intervene. One person who had once been invited inside said the air was thick, like there was no oxygen. Anthony Sowell was arrested that same day. In interrogation, he remained silent most of the time. When he did speak, his voice was level, neither raised nor lowered. He offered no explanation for his actions, no apology, and showed no reaction when police read the names of each victim. Sowell's trial began in 2011 and lasted for months. Prosecutors described him as a predator living within the community, exploiting indifference and fear to operate undetected. Witnesses included women who had escaped his house, recounting being attacked and restrained. Some described Sowell letting them go when he lost interest. In the courtroom, Sowell sat upright, eyes fixed on the table. When crime scene images were shown, his expression did not change. Some jurors later said his silence was more disturbing than the photographs. In August 2011, Anthony Sowell was sentenced to death for multiple counts of murder and related crimes. He was held at Chillicothe Prison in Ohio, awaiting execution. In 2021, Sowell died in prison from illness before the sentence could be carried out. The house at 1205 Imperial Avenue was demolished soon after the trial concluded. The lot is now just grass. But for those who once lived nearby, the memory of the smell remains. Some say that on hot days, when the wind passes over the site, it feels as though the odor returns. For the Cleveland community, one question remains. Why did it take 2 years and 11 deaths before the house was searched? Many believe that if the victims had been white women from a wealthier neighborhood, the outcome would have been different. But on Imperial Avenue, the signs, the strange smell, the brief cries, were ignored until there was no one left to save. After the house on Imperial Avenue was demolished, the smell seemed to have disappeared. But for those who had lived nearby, it never faded. On a hot day, when the wind passed over the empty lot, the memory would return. They said the smell reminded them of other places, not cities, but stretches of land farther away, where barns and fields lay open, where the sharp scent of animals and damp soil blended, masking something else. In the suburbs of Vancouver, Canada, a quiet pig farm had stood for years. Its owner often gave free meat to neighbors. No one thought that the faint odor from the pens could conceal a secret large enough to erase dozens of people. If, watching this far, you notice a detail that unsettles you, leave it in the comments. It may be the thing others have overlooked. And if you want to keep opening doors most people avoid, subscribe so that when the next story begins, you will be the first to step inside with us. The farm in Port Coquitlam, outside Vancouver, sat apart from the main roads. A steel gate was always closed, the perimeter ringed with barbed wire. Inside were pig pens, old barns, and a small weathered house. The man who lived there, Robert Willie Picton, was known to neighbors as an eccentric farmer, quiet but willing to give away pork during holidays. Picton was born in 1949 and grew up on the farm. His parents raised pigs and sold meat at small markets. From an early age, Picton was accustomed to the strong smell of the pens and the work of slaughtering. After his parents died, he and his brother took over the land and the livestock. In addition to farming, Picton hosted small gatherings, inviting friends and acquaintances from Vancouver's red light district. From the late 1980s, dozens of women from the downtown east side began to disappear. Most were sex workers or drug users, often with no family to report them missing immediately. As the number of disappearances grew, the community raised concerns, but the authorities' response was slow and fragmented. Picton often drove his truck into the city, particularly to East Hastings. Some women were last seen getting into his vehicle, but none were seen again. Rumors spread, but no one had proof. In February 2002, police obtained a warrant to search Picton's farm, initially for illegal weapons. Upon entering, they noticed a strange odor. Not exactly the smell of pigs, but a heavy, sweet scent that lingered in the air. In the barns, they found women's clothing, identification documents, and personal items that were stained. The search expanded to the slaughter area and the garbage pits. In the days that followed, forensic teams excavated several areas of the farm. They found bones, fragments so small they had to be sifted. Some remains were inside a meat grinder and in containers used to feed the pigs. DNA testing identified several of the missing women. According to investigative records, Picton had kept some victims in his home before killing them. The property was more than 20 kilometers from the red light district, yet no one seemed to come looking. The barns and high fencing were enough to mask any sound. When arrested, Picton did not react strongly. In a covert conversation with an undercover officer posing as a cellmate, he boasted that he had done nearly 50 people, but stopped at 49 to avoid a round number. These words later became part of the evidence presented in court. Robert Picton's trial began in 2007 and drew nationwide attention. Prosecutors presented evidence from the crime scene, including the DNA of 33 women found on the farm. Due to the complexity of the case, the court proceeded first with 6 counts of murder. Picton was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, with no parole for 25 years. Many families of the victims received only a few bone fragments, or nothing at all. They were left to know that the rest of their loved ones may have been processed with pig feed. After the case closed, authorities demolished the entire farm. The land was left vacant, overgrown with grass. But those who had lived nearby said the acrid smell of the soil remained, even though the pigs and barns were gone. The story of Robert Picton left a gap in the Vancouver community that could not easily be filled. Many believed that if the victims had not been poor, addicted, or working in the red light district, police would have acted sooner. But in that place, for nearly 2 decades, one man could travel to the city, return to the farm, and vanish along with those no one searched for. When the Port Coquitlam farm was torn down, many thought that smell had finally gone. But for those who had once stood near the fence, it lingered. Not in the air, but in memory. Half a world away, another smell had once been ignored. Not the smell of soil, not of livestock, but something that clung to old wooden walls, slipped through narrow doorways, and stayed on the clothes of those who had just stepped outside. In 1975, in Hamburg, Germany, firefighters forced open the door of a small attic room after smoke began seeping out. When the smoke cleared, the strange odor remained and led them to a discovery no one in the neighborhood had imagined. Hamburg, Germany, in the 1970s. In the St. Pauli district, where small bars stood side by side, there was an old building with narrow, rotting wooden stairs. In the attic, room 24 belonged to Fritz Honka, a small, hunched man with narrow eyes and thinning hair. By day, he worked odd jobs, cleaning, hauling. At night, Honka frequented the bar Zum Goldenen Handschuh, the Golden Glove, a place where solitary drinkers gathered alongside older women who worked the streets. Honka was born in 1935 in Leipzig, growing up during wartime and poverty. His father was taken for forced labor. His mother struggled to raise the children. His teenage years were marked by reform schools and temporary jobs. He moved to Hamburg, living alone, with few friends, speaking in a slurred voice due to the near-total loss of his teeth. In the early 1970s, neighbors occasionally complained about the unpleasant smell coming from attic room number 24. Honka explained it was because he kept cats and did not clean often. They accepted this, partly out of reluctance to engage, partly because the familiar odors of alcohol and tobacco in the area masked much else. From 1970 to 1975, 4 women disappeared from the St. Pauli district. All were transient or worked in bars, with no family to report them missing immediately. Honka often met them at the Zum Goldenen Handschuh, the Golden Glove, inviting them back to his attic room to drink. None were seen leaving. Inside the room, the ceiling was low, the walls stained, the furniture in disarray. The smell of alcohol, tobacco, and another scent, heavy and sweet, clung to every surface. Honka hid the victims' bodies in plastic bags, storing them in the attic or behind plywood panels. When the odor became too strong, he sprayed cheap perfume throughout the room, creating an unpleasant mix but not enough to provoke deeper suspicion. On July 17, 1975, a fire broke out in the building. Firefighters forced open the door to room 24 to check for danger. When the smoke cleared, the strange odor was stronger than any smell of burning. Following it, they found multiple black plastic bags containing human remains, some badly decomposed. The investigation later identified them as 4 missing women: Anna Böschel, Frieda Roblick, Ruth Schult, and 1 unidentified victim. Honka was arrested shortly afterward while working near the harbor. In questioning, he admitted killing them while drunk, often after arguments or being refused sex. His voice was steady, without change in tone as he named each victim. The 1976 trial drew wide coverage in the German press. Prosecutors described Honka as a silent killer, living in the middle of a crowded neighborhood, yet unnoticed. His defense cited psychiatric records, claiming he acted in states of loss of control caused by alcohol and childhood trauma. The court sentenced Fritz Honka to 15 years in prison and compulsory psychiatric treatment. In 1993, he was released, living in a nursing home under a false name. Honka died in 1998, quietly, as he had lived the latter part of his life behind bars. The building where the crimes occurred was demolished. But the Zum Goldenen Handschuh bar remains. Some say that on rainy nights, standing at the counter, they can smell a damp, acrid odor drifting through the door. Its source unclear. Older residents avoid mentioning Attic Room 24, as if silence is the only way to keep the past in the dark. From California, London, Cleveland, Vancouver, to Hamburg, each story began with a smell: burnt, damp, acrid, sickly sweet. The smell of something neighbors thought was trash, soil, or pig feed, but which was the final signal before everything disappeared. Those smells clung to walls, to thresholds, to memory. Not everyone noticed, and when they did, it was too late. We often think that evil will knock loudly or leave clear traces. But in all the stories just told, it was only a wall away, a fence away, a morning greeting away. And it began with something small, a strange smell no one wanted to ask about. If there is a detail that lingers with you, leave it in the comments. It may be the one others have overlooked. And if you want to keep stepping into stories most people avoid, subscribe, so when the next door opens, you will be the first to step inside with us.